Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fighter Heart podcast. I'm here sitting with Brooke, and thank you for coming here. Thanks for being part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, as you know, every week we have someone on that speaks about how they've overcome extreme adversity and lived to tell a tale and come out better for it. So, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, Brooke, and give us your Fighter Heart story, and then from there, we'll learn more about your future plans.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brooke Eby. I am 34 years old. I would say the first 29 years of my life were perfectly basic, not nothing too exciting to report. I remember like struggling to write my SAT or my, what is it called? College essays that we had to write because you're supposed to talk about a hardship. And I remember being like, life is great. What do you mean? And then when I turned 29, I was living in New York City working for Salesforce, where I still work. And I was walking to an event with a few of my colleagues and I started limping. And I just thought maybe I had tweaked my back. I didn't think it was all that noticeable, but a few of my coworkers pointed out, you're definitely walking slower than the rest of us. And so I ran to my sister, who is a doctor, and she and her husband had me do this little living room test where they said, walk forward on your heels. So I was walking forward and my right heel was staying up okay. My left foot would immediately smack down onto the ground. So I really couldn't hold weight onto my left heel, which turns out to be something called foot drop. I'd never heard of it before. And they seemed concerned, but not too, it wasn't scary for me at the time. So I started going to doctors at the age of 29. And I really went through like a 4-year diagnosis process from there. I remember going to that first doctor and getting an MRI and expecting to see something that they could fix. It came back clean. Then I got a CAT scan. It came back clean. X-rays came back clean. And so we really couldn't figure out what was causing the muscle issue in my foot. So 4 years later, I'm sort of struggling to walk and I'm thinking it's just my left foot, but all of a sudden I start feeling some weakness in my right foot too. And so that was when I started realizing this was a bigger deal than we had all initially thought. So I went back to the doctor after 4 years of appointments and I was given the official diagnosis of ALS, which most people know as Lou Gehrig's disease. It is the worst diagnosis you can get because they say you have probably an average of 2 to 5 years to live. There are a couple of medications you can take, but they might extend your life for a couple of months and you'll probably go paralyzed very, very quickly. And so there's not a ton of hope in that diagnosis to know, I have a short time to live. I may not be able to move, talk, swallow, speak during those months that I have left. And so those first couple months after my diagnosis were pretty bleak. I think I crawled into bed and just like ate M&Ms and distracted myself. I remember I would like Google ALS and then I would close at the window and I was like, oh, I don't want to know. And so a couple months after my diagnosis, I was finally forced out of bed because I had a really good friend's wedding and I was a bridesmaid. So I certainly couldn't hide in the crowd, but I was showing up to that wedding in a dress that was like a little bit too tight because I hadn't gotten out of bed and with a walker. And this is in front of all of my college friends that I had, I hadn't seen some of them in years. Most of them were like working out, getting spray tans for this wedding. Like they wanted to look their best. And I was showing up just not feeling good about myself and not being excited to be using a walker. So as I was walking in, I turned to my friend and I was like, please, let's just leave. Like, I can't do this. And my best friend from childhood was like, this could be really embarrassing, Brooke, or like, let's just try to make it really fun. It's going to be a really great story to tell later. And like 2 hours later, the bride was limboing under my walker and I was giving people walker rides all over the dance floor. And I feel like that was the first time that I was like, okay, I can still be myself and like have my same personality, even though I was labeled as this diagnosis. So from there, I started sharing with a broader audience. I downloaded TikTok like any millennial would, and just started sharing my story on there as Limp Bruise kit. Not a huge Limp Bizkit fan, but I was limping and it seemed to make sense. Um, and just kind of attracted a community that was either interested in ALS or interested in seeing a young face with a terminal diagnosis. And I've kind of just been sharing ever since. It's been like a year and change since I first posted. And at this point, my whole goal is just to bring awareness to the disease, but also to make people comfortable in asking questions and make people laugh and just get more eyes on it, because it's a disease that takes people so quickly and it takes their voices so quickly that not a ton of people get to advocate for it the way, some diseases have a group of survivors. Like ALS holds no survivors. So because I'm still talking and I still have my voice, I just want to be sharing as much as I can.
I mean, you seem to have a super bright outlook, or you're putting it on anyway. If you are, so like, how do you keep such an upbeat personality and like happy vibe?
Yeah, I think it's just been the way I've approached everything in my life. Like I was the youngest of three kids and I was younger by a lot. So the only way I could even enter into conversations was by making a joke. Like that was always my in. And so I think I was just trained at a young age to find humor in anything. And I was worried my first couple months after diagnosis. I was like, well, there goes that. Like I'm never going to be happy or laugh again. But after that wedding, I think it all came back to me where I was like, I'm going to laugh in the face of this disease and hope that people are, excited to laugh along with me.
That's cool. So that was literally your turning point where you just flipped the switch, basically.
Completely.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you said going back, that you were it was like a 4-year diagnosis. When did they actually tell you you had ALS?
It was March of 2022. And I remember the appointment perfectly because I'd been to like hundreds of appointments over those 4 years. And so at this point, I wasn't even bringing people with me because I was like, I can handle another appointment by myself. So when I went to this appointment, I went by myself and they ran this test that they had run probably 10 times on me, where it's kind of disgusting, but they stick needles into your muscles and they have you move the muscles basically to see if your brain is communicating to those muscles. And I'd had this test done so many times, but this time after the test, he like wheeled up next to me and was like, I don't like what I'm seeing. And I remember like everything just fell, like my stomach dropped, I immediately started crying. Like it was just not a good moment that I should have seen coming in hindsight. Like I think a lot of it was denial, but I did not see it coming at all. But that led me to officially get the ALS diagnosis. But that was the point that I knew.
Yeah, that's got to be hard to deal with. Did you remember who did you call right after you got out of the
I called, so I texted my sister during the appointment saying he says it doesn't look good, which is like the most ominous text that an older sister can get from her baby sister. But my sister called me and we were just like crying. We had no idea, because when you get told that, like there's something about putting a label on something you've been living with that makes it so much scarier. Like I had been living with symptoms for 4 years before they smacked a label on it. But for some reason, once they called it ALS, I was like, I'm going to die tomorrow. Like it's going to happen fast now just because there's a name associated with it. And so my sister and I were like, do we make a bucket list? Like, what do we do? We called my parents and they were like, that is not the news we were hoping for. Like we just all were kind of lost. And then I do remember I told a couple of close friends, but I really hated telling people because I was just like, here, let me ruin your day. Give me 2 minutes to ruin your day. And it wasn't fun. Like I'd end up crying, they'd end up crying. It was just not pleasant. So social media helped me with that also, because it let me speak to a larger group without having to have these really heavy one-on-one conversations when I still wasn't comfortable with it myself. Now I feel like I'm so desensitized to it because I talk about it so much that it doesn't scare me as much to have those conversations. But in the early days, I was very sensitive about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. So when did I assume you started doing the social media stuff after the wedding?
Yeah. So the wedding was in May, and I think I posted my first TikTok in like June or July. I actually got COVID from that wedding, which like thanks. It was a great wedding overall. I had to show up with a walker and I left with COVID. But when I had COVID, I had these like really crazy like fever dreams basically. And I made a notes app of like funny things that have happened to me since getting diagnosed. And I just bulleted out some funny things. And like I still have that note app. Like 75% of them are gibberish. And I think it was just like COVID brain. Like there's one that just says shoes on the bullet list. And I'm like, what? I have no idea what that was supposed to mean. But I had a couple of ideas, and I went to brunch with my friend like a month later when I'd finally recovered. And I showed her a couple of them, and she was like, we're making you a TikTok tonight. And so I was like, all right, you're going to be in the first one with me because I'm not going to be embarrassed alone. And ever since that, we've been posting like crazy.
Can you share a couple? Do you remember any?
A couple of the ideas or the videos?
No, the videos.
So
No, the ideas, the ideas.
the first video we did was that same childhood friend who like encouraged me to go into the wedding. Her name's Jackie. She's like equally as well known on my social media as I am at this point. But when I had first gotten diagnosed, I told her, and I was like, yeah, they're saying it's ALS, but it's like a slower version of ALS. And, like they don't really know how it's going to progress. And I remember she was like, maybe they'll name it after you. And for some reason that like was the first time I had laughed since getting the diagnosis. Cause I was just like, that's the perfect response for someone like me to just like make light of it. And so that was our first video, was her being like, maybe they'll name it after you. But a couple of the other ideas, again, most of them were nonsensical, but it was like funny things people said to me on the street, funny like responses I had. Like for some reason, when people ask me on the street, like, oh my gosh, what happened when I was using a cane, I'd like panic every time and be like, you should see the other guy. And it was just like, why? Like I have a whole social media dedicated to promoting ALS, and yet like on the spot, I just panic and make a bad joke. So it's a lot of moments like that.
Yeah, actually, I was in a shark. I was fighting off two sharks.
Right. I'm like, wow, what's wrong with my brain that I can't just be like, I have ALS? Like, I think it's just because like it's like an elevator pitch, like when you're in an elevator, you only have like 5 seconds. So to be like, I have ALS, and then the doors close, you're like, well, I just ruined someone's day.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Bye.
Just walk away.
Yeah. So I just came up with some weird responses, but yeah.
So how do you think can you explain your day to day? So how does your day, what's a day in the life?
Yeah, I mean, ALS moves very quickly, even in us slow progressors. So I went from using a cane to a walker to a wheelchair in a matter of 6 months. Like it was very fast. So I'm in a wheelchair full time at this point. And so my day to day, in terms of like what I do, hasn't changed that much, but how I do them has had to be adjusted a lot. So I still work full time. I work at Salesforce. They've been super supportive of me throughout this whole like diagnosis journey, advocacy journey. Like they're behind me. So I work during the day, and then I try to do a lot of like advocacy stuff, videos, whatever I can do at night. But in terms of like how I get around, my apartment is just filled with gadgets now. Like I've got a wheelchair, I've got a rollator, my toilet seat is raised, my shower has a chair in it. Like there's always something to protect me from falling everywhere I go.
Jeez. Is there any pain associated, or it's like numb?
Neither actually. So I have heard people have pain with ALS. I've been lucky enough not to so far. The only pain I've had is just like I'm sitting all day. And so that is sort of a new feeling. But I don't have numbness either. So with ALS, basically like your brain disconnects from your muscles through something called motor neurons. Now, your sensory neurons do not change. So I can still completely feel like touch everywhere. I like if I stub my toe, it still hurts. But my brain can't tell my foot to lift.
Ooh, yeah.
So like I can't actually move my feet. But like if you were to pinch them, they would hurt.
And obviously they don't know how this happens, right?
Yeah, it's the
The
most
genetic.
underfunded disease for how devastating it is. So they don't understand, we don't understand how people get it, why people progress faster than others, why like veterans are so much more likely to get it, why athletes are so much more likely to get it. Like there's so much unknown. And if you look at like federal funding for diseases, I mean, ALS is wildly underfunded. So I've tried to focus on fundraising quite a bit through social media, but a big change needs to be made given how not rare it is. Like it's considered a rare disease by the CDC, which is fine. They can have their like qualifications. But with ALS, the reason it feels so rare is because it's such a quick death sentence. Like people get it and they die a lot of the time. So like there's not a ton of people living with it at one point in time because they've passed so quickly. And so we don't have this like population of people living with it, population of survivors, the way like most diseases can have,
Yeah.
knock on wood. And so it's far less rare than people imagine. It's not largely genetic, like no one in my family has it. So it can really strike at any time, and we don't know why or how or what the outcome will be.
Yeah, it's very I mean, it's been around so long. It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's not funded more. Like Lou Gehrig's like what, like 90 years ago or something?
Yeah, I think the first case was like 150 some years ago. But yeah, we've had like Lou Gehrig, Stephen Hawking, like it's been in the public eye. I just don't think people realize, like I didn't know anything about it before I got diagnosed. I thought it was like a big genetic disease. I thought it was 1 in a billion would get it.
Yeah, like did something get triggered that day when you were walking with your friends? Like I don't even like how did it happen?
Yeah, no one really knows. Like I think we all theorize about what has caused our individual one. Like, was it, some kind of like inflammatory process? Was I on like something that triggered something lying dormant within me? Like
Because
there's
before that
theories.
day you didn't have anything, right? Like you didn't.
No limping. I had some like stomach problems for years and I got put on medication for that. And it was like a heavy dose of steroids. So
Mm,
like, was there something lying in within me that the
yeah.
steroids triggered? Probably in my mind, but like there's no medical evidence to back that. So yeah, I mean, donate to ALS because they need it.
Awesome. So how what is if you could spell it out, your Instagram that people can follow you and your TikTok.
Yeah, it's so if you search for Brooke EB, it should pop up, but the actual username is Limp LIMP BROOZKIT. So
I
Limp Bruise Kit.
so the same as Limp Bizkit. They did
Yeah,
IT.
just a BROO in the middle of Limp Bizkit. So
Beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful. All right, what do you plan on doing the rest of the day?
Today so tomorrow is actually the walk to defeat ALS in DC. So a bunch of my friends are coming in tonight. They're all traveling to come, which is going to be so fun. We're all dressing up like Fred Durst in Limp Bizkit. So we're all going to be wearing shirts like this and then backwards caps, and we got like tattoo sleeves and eyeliner. Like we're going all out. So tonight, a big part of my night is going to be making a lot of bracelets that say like FALS and ALS so that we can pass them out at the walk like a Taylor Swift concert. But yeah, it's going to be a really fun weekend, so I'm excited.
Very cool. I'm happy for you. I know you'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Like, is there any words of wisdom you could give to someone maybe that has just found out that they've gotten diagnosed that they have ALS?
Yeah, I feel like I have two pieces of advice. One is find a support group. Like I'm in two support groups and they help me so much. One is local, so it's people that are nearby that have recommendations locally. And then I also found one with a bunch of girls in my age group who were diagnosed very young. Those two are really great places for me to just vent and ask questions to and not feel so strange. Like when you're diagnosed with something, there's something inherently embarrassing about it because you're like, I'm different. it just helps you with all of that. And then the second, this company Roon, Roon, just came out with like basically an all-in-one ALS page. So they recruited a ton of people living with ALS, a ton of the top doctors, caregivers, like anyone related to the ALS world. And they had us make videos doing Q&A. So I answered like hundreds of questions for them. And they basically made guides on their website that's like, I was just diagnosed. What do I need to know? And so they break it down. Like I wish I had it when I was first diagnosed, because again, Googling is not your friend early days. So they've done a really good job of making it more digestible in the early days.
Very cool. So, all right, find a support group, hit up Brune.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Don't be afraid to laugh, even though it feels like the last thing you want to do. Like there's always a joke in everything.
That's words of wisdom too. All right, Brooke. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, enjoy your walk tomorrow in Washington.
Yeah, hope for no rain for us.
Yes, definitely. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening to another Fighter Heart podcast. We'll be back next week. Thank you.